Who are you really beyond your name, your profession, and your identity?
That is, wow, that's a heavy question.
Right. It is a heavy question to start with, but it's exactly the concept we are tackling today. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We have a fascinating stack of source material in front of us today, you guys. We're looking at Chapter 1 of the book The Path Within You by Akib.
Yeah, specifically the chapter titled, What is Gyan Marg?
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive, the whole reason we're sitting here, is to explore this ancient path of knowledge, because that is what Gyan Marg translates to. And we want to unpack how this incredibly dense, timeless wisdom can actually help you, the modern individual, discover your true, authentic self.
It really is a remarkable journey to embark on because, I mean, we live in an era that is just, it's completely obsessed with identity construction.
And
We
absolutely.
build these elaborate avatars based on what we do for a living, where we come from, our political affiliations,
Right.
or just how we curate our social media profiles.
Right, the highlight reel.
Yeah. But this text strips every single one of those constructs away. It asks you to look at the very foundation of your awareness. It's a radical departure from how we usually think about ourselves.
Okay, let's unpack this in the source material. Jod spends a lot of time discussing how human beings are naturally wired to search for the truth. He describes this built-in need to constantly ask, why? But why is that? I mean, is it just evolutionary curiosity, or is the author pointing to something deeper?
He frames this not just as a psychological quirk or a survival mechanism. He frames it as a fundamental spiritual drive. According to the text, certain individuals carry what he calls an unquenchable fire of inquiry.
An unquenchable fire. I like that.
Yeah. They simply cannot accept things on blind faith or societal consensus. Like, if someone tells them, hey, this is just how the world works, stop asking questions and get back to your spreadsheets.
Their brain just fundamentally rejects it.
Completely.
Yeah.
They demand to know the architecture of reality. They have this deep, innate need to understand the fundamental nature of existence itself.
That tracks. That completely tracks with the people who lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering if consciousness is a byproduct of the brain or if we're living in a simulation.
Exactly. And society often pathologizes that kind of overthinking. We're told to just be practical. But the text suggests that for these individuals, the question itself is the entire point.
And I guess that drive brings us to a massive misconception that the text urgently tries to correct. When people hear phrases like the path of knowledge or Gyan Marg, they immediately apply a Western academic framework to it.
Right. They assume it means gathering information.
Right. The assumption is that to walk the path of knowledge, you need to read 1,000 philosophical texts, secure multiple university degrees, memorize vast amounts of spiritual data.
Which is such a common trap.
It's the illusion of productivity. If I listen to enough lectures or read enough books, I am making spiritual progress.
But the text draws a razor-sharp, uncompromising distinction here. Gyan does not mean information.
Oh.
Gyan means realization.
So, if it isn't about memorizing concepts, how does the author illustrate the difference between simply having information and actually experiencing realization?
He uses two deeply evocative analogies that perfectly encapsulate this. The first is about fire.
Fire, okay.
So having information means knowing on an intellectual level that fire burns. You can understand the chemical equation for combustion.
You can memorize the exact temperature human skin cells sustain damage.
Exactly. That is all information. But realization is the singular moment your bare hand actually touches a live flame.
Ouch. Yeah.
Right. In that split second, you are not thinking about chemistry. You feel in your very marrow what fire truly is, that visceral, undeniable, transformative experience that is realization.
It's the difference between reading the menu and actually tasting the meal. One is abstract, the other is undeniably real.
Perfectly said.
There is a second analogy in the text, too, and I think it hits much closer to home for most of us.
Yeah, it forces you to confront mortality.
Always a fun topic for a Tuesday.
Right. But the author points out that every human being already knows, as a factual piece of information, that they're going to die one day. We see it on the news, we read history books, we understand the biological life cycle.
But that information rarely changes how we behave on a Tuesday afternoon.
Because we keep it at an intellectual distance. We think, yes, people die, but that is a vague event scheduled for the distant future.
We think we have time.
Then comes the moment of realization. Have you ever felt the truth of your own mortality so deeply, maybe after a close call or losing someone near to you, that it completely and instantly shifted your priorities?
Oh, absolutely. A moment where you suddenly stop caring about office politics.
Or what your neighbors think of your car. You actually feel an urgent need to truly live. The text argues that if you've experienced that shift, you have made the journey from information to realization. Gyan is not what you know in your head. It is the truth that fundamentally alters your existence.
Okay, but if the goal is this kind of visceral realization, how do we navigate through the absolute avalanche of daily experiences to find it? Because right now, my inbox, my social media feed, my daily anxieties, they all feel very real and very urgent. How does one filter the noise?
The foundational tool for this path, according to the text, is a concept called Vivek.
Vivek.
Yes, which translates to the power of discernment. It's the cultivated ability to look at any experience, any emotion, or any object in your life and clearly see the difference between what is permanent and what is fleeting.
Let's push on that for a second. Discerning the permanent from the fleeting sounds poetic, but in practice, almost everything in my life is fleeting. My career status, my bank balance, even my physical health.
Which is exactly the revelation Vivek is designed to provoke.
Oh.
When you apply this intense discernment, you realize that almost everything you anchor your identity to is destined to change and eventually disappear. And when you anchor your sense of self to fleeting things like a job title or a relationship, you are guaranteeing future suffering because those things are inherently unstable.
So mastering discernment means shifting your anchor away from the temporary and toward the eternal.
Precisely.
Has anyone historically built a cohesive framework around this idea of shifting the anchor to the eternal? Because it feels like a monumental task to figure out on your own.
They absolutely have. And that brings us to the philosophical heavyweight of the text.
Yeah.
An 8th century master named Adi Shankaracharya.
Right.
His story alone is staggering. He lived for only 32 years, yet he completely re-engineered the landscape of Eastern philosophy. He's the preeminent figure of a school of thought called Advaita Vedanta.
Advaita translates to not to, correct? The idea of non-duality.
That is correct. It is the radical understanding that everything in existence is ultimately one. There's no separation between you and the universe.
That's a huge concept to wrap your head around.
It is, but Shankaracharya condensed his entire massive body of teaching into 3 luminous foundational sentences.
Walk us through those 3 sentences, because if an 8th century genius distilled the nature of reality into 3 lines, we should probably pay attention.
Definitely. The first sentence is Brahma Satyam. This declares that Brahman, which is the supreme, absolute, infinite reality, is the only actual truth that exists. It's the unchanging, eternal ground of all being.
Okay, so if Brahman is the only truth, where does that leave the world we are interacting with right now?
That is addressed in the second sentence. Jagat Mithya. This translates to the world is an appearance or the world is an illusion.
Hold on, I need to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Calling the world an illusion sounds great in a monastery, but if I touch a hot stove, my hand blisters. If I don't pay my mortgage, the bank takes my house. Those consequences feel incredibly real. How can this text claim the world is just an appearance?
The vital question, and is where people often misunderstand Advaita Vedanta. Shankaracharya is not saying the world is a hallucination.
Like seeing a mirage of an oasis that doesn't exist.
Right, he's not saying that.
Yeah.
He uses the concept of relative reality versus absolute reality. The world is real relative to your physical body, but it is an appearance because it's constantly changing and it's entirely dependent on your sensory perception.
Okay.
The classic metaphor is superimposition. Imagine sitting in a movie theater. You get so absorbed in the film that you feel genuine terror during a scary scene.
Sure, heart rate goes up.
Exactly. The movie is real in the sense that light is projecting onto a screen, but the monster isn't real. You have superimposed the drama of the movie onto the blank, unchanging screen behind it.
Oh, I see where that leads.
Yeah.
The blank screen is Brahma Satyam, the absolute truth, and the movie playing over it, with all its drama, heartbreak, and joy, is Jagat Mithya, the changing appearance.
Precisely the point the text makes,
Okay.
which leads to the third and arguably most radical sentence, Jivo Brahmaiva Napara.
And that means...
It means the individual soul and Brahman are exactly the same. You are not separate from the divine. You're not a tiny fragment of it. You're not a creation standing apart from the creator. You are the absolute reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because conceptually understanding the world is an appearance is one thing. But how does the text suggest we actually internalize that? Because right now, sitting in this chair, the world feels incredibly solid.
The author utilizes one of the most profound tools in Advaita Vedanta to bridge that gap, The dream analogy.
The dream analogy.
Think about the biological and psychological reality of what happens every single night when you go to sleep and enter a dream. In that state, your mind generates an entire universe.
You meet people, navigate landscapes.
You experience complex narratives. And while you are in the dream, everything feels 100% solid. You do not question the physics of the dream world.
It is entirely convincing. If I'm being chased by something terrifying in a dream, my physical heart is actually pounding in the real world. I'm sweating. The fear is a tangible, measurable, physiological response.
Because the illusion is absolute. But then an alarm goes off. You wake up, and in the fraction of a second that your eyes open and the light hits your retinas, a massive paradigm shift occurs.
You realize you're just in bed.
You instantly realize that none of it was real.
Yeah.
The monster, the landscape, the people you spoke to, the entire universe of that dream was nothing but a projection of your own consciousness.
Right.
Shankaracharya's teaching declares that this waking world you're experiencing right now is fundamentally no different. It is just a longer, more elaborate, more consistent dream.
That is a staggering proposition. It suggests that all the modern phenomena we stress over, our credit scores, our social standing, our career trajectories, are essentially made of dream stuff.
And it forces a very uncomfortable but liberating question. What happens when you wake up from this waking dream?
What does happen?
When Gyan, true realization, dawns within you, you realize that you were never the physical body navigating the dream. You were never your anxious mind. You are the pure, infinite consciousness that the dream is appearing within.
But if that is the case, if I'm already this perfect, infinite consciousness, if I am Brahman, why am I so stressed?
That's the million-dollar question.
Why does my chest tighten when I get a passive-aggressive email? Why don't I walk around feeling like an infinite, untroubled being?
The sages have a highly specific diagnostic word for this human condition: avidya.
Avidya, ignorance.
It translates to ignorance, but not in the sense of lacking a university education. It refers to a fundamental forgetting of your true identity. Over the course of a lifetime, we bury our true self under incredibly thick, complex layers of false identification.
We basically put on a series of costumes and eventually forget we're wearing them.
We become utterly convinced that we are the costume. We believe we are aging bodies. We believe we are our high-stress jobs. We believe we are the sum total of our traumas and anxieties.
Which is exhausting.
It is. Therefore, the path of Gyan Marg is not about acquiring some new, shiny spiritual superpower. It's a process of unlayering. And the text introduces an ancient, incredibly surgical method for doing this called neti neti.
Neti neti. Not this, not this. It sounds like a process of elimination.
That's exactly what it is.
How does a listener actually apply a thousands of years old philosophical tool to their modern life?
You apply it by relentlessly investigating your own sense of I. You start with the most obvious, dense layer, the physical form. You look at your hands, you feel your heartbeat, and you ask yourself, am I this body? And using discernment, the answer must be neti, not this.
I can imagine people pushing back on that. When you have a migraine or when you are dealing with a chronic illness, your body dictates your entire reality. It feels impossible to say, I am not this body.
It is incredibly difficult, which is why the text relies on logic to break the identification. Think of it this way. The body changes ceaselessly. The physical body you inhabited as a 5-year-old is completely gone. Every cell has regenerated.
True.
The body you have right now will be completely different when you are 80. It grows, it gets sick, it ages, it heals. But you, the conscious observer, have remained a constant presence watching all these biological changes happen.
The watcher doesn't age.
Exactly. Logic dictates that you cannot be the object that is constantly changing. You must be the awareness that is observing the change.
So layer 1 is gone. I am not the physical body. Neti, where does the inquiry go next?
You move one step inward to a much stickier layer. You ask, am I this mind? Am I these thoughts, memories, and emotions? Neti, not this.
Because thoughts change too.
Thoughts are entirely transient. They're like weather patterns passing across the sky. Sometimes there is a violent thunderstorm of anger or grief. Other times there are light, fluffy clouds of joy and contentment.
But you are not the weather.
You are the sky watching the weather happen. If you were your thoughts, you would literally cease to exist in the silent gaps between two thoughts. But you don't. You are the one who watches the thought arise, peak, and dissolve.
There is an immense psychological relief in that, the realization that I am the sky, not the passing storm. It immediately creates a buffer between me and my anxiety.
It creates vital space.
But what happens when we go deeper than passing thoughts? What about the core of my personality, my intellect, my political views, my ego? The very sense of being a unique individual named me.
This is where Nettie becomes truly radical.
Hmm.
Am I the intellect or the ego? Nettie, not this. And the text points to a universal human experience to prove this. Deep, dreamless sleep.
Dreamless sleep.
Every night you enter a state of deep sleep where your intellect completely shuts down. You are not solving math problems. Furthermore, your ego is entirely offline. You do not know your name, you do not know your gender, your profession, or your past traumas. The individual you vanishes completely.
And yet I don't die.
Exactly. You do not cease to exist. Something profound continues to be present in that darkness. Because when you wake up the next morning, you intuitively say, I slept so deeply and peacefully.
Oh, wow.
The inquiry demands you ask, who is the I that knows the sleep was peaceful, even when the mind, body, and ego were completely shut down?
So if I systematically strip away the body, the passing thoughts, the intellect, the social conditioning, and even the ego, what is actually left at the bottom of the barrel?
What remains when every false layer is peeled away is pure, unadulterated awareness. The text refers to this as the Sakshi, the eternal
The
witness.
Sakshi.
It is the part of you that never changes, it is never born, it never suffers, and it never dies. It is the infinite, boundless consciousness that simply illuminates every experience. That witness is who you truly are.
The eternal witness. It is a beautiful concept. But to make this super practical for our listeners, the text highlights the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. He was a 20th century sage who took all this dense, ancient philosophy and turned it into a devastatingly simple, real-time practice.
You really did. Ramana Maharshi understood that modern minds are easily tangled in complex concepts. So he bypassed all the heavy philosophical frameworks and taught the practice of self-inquiry using one singular piercing question. Who am I?
How does someone use that when they are caught in the chaotic machinery of modern life? Let's say I'm sitting at my desk and suddenly a wave of intense anxiety hits me because of a project deadline or a conflict with a coworker. The anxiety feels all-consuming.
Typically, when anxiety hits, we either fight it, which makes it stronger, or we get completely lost in the narrative. We start generating hypothetical future disasters.
Spiral.
The spiral. Ramana Maharshi's method tells you to stop engaging with the content of the anxiety entirely. Instead, you catch the thought and ask internally, to whom has this feeling of anxiety come?
The natural answer is, well, it has come to me.
And the moment you say to me, you ask the ultimate follow-up question, then who am I? You use the anxiety itself as a breadcrumb trail to trace your awareness back to its source.
Turning the flashlight of consciousness away from the stressful email and shining it back onto the thinker.
Exactly. When you pursue this persistently, the false identification with the anxious ego starts to dissolve, the layers fall away, and you find yourself resting in the infinite silence of the witness.
So, what does this all mean? We have explored fire and mortality, we've debated the world as a dream state, we've peeled away layers of the ego, and we've asked, who am I?
We've covered a lot of ground.
We really have. If we synthesize all this profound wisdom from Chapter 1 of The Path Within You, what are the core transformative takeaways for the listener? How does this ancient knowledge fundamentally change their life today?
There are two immensely powerful lessons we can distill from this deep dive. The first is a principle we can call transformation over accumulation. Gyan Marg is absolutely not about what you know, it's about what transforms you.
Which is a necessary warning. It is so easy to fall into the trap of building a massive spiritual ego where you read all the right books just so you can sound enlightened or win philosophical debates on the internet.
The text explicitly warns against the intellectual ego. The goal of this path is not to become a walking encyclopedia of spiritual data. If you have studied Advaita Vedanta for 20 years, but you still react with the exact same road rage, the exact same petty jealousy, and the exact same existential dread as before,
You've only gathered information.
exactly. True knowledge can fundamentally reduces your suffering. It changes your relationship with reality.
And what is the second major takeaway we can draw from this chapter?
Understanding the true self is the absolute non-negotiable foundation of spiritual growth. The most profound relief offered by this path is the realization that enlightenment is not a distant achievement. You do not need to acquire anything new.
You don't need to add to yourself.
You do not need to build a better, more optimized version of yourself. You only need to remove the avidya, the false identifications and costumes that are currently hiding your true nature. You are already complete. You are already whole. You just have to stop pretending to be everything you are not.
It is a process of unlearning rather than learning. You are simply remembering the silent presence you have always been beneath the relentless noise of your daily life.
It truly is the ultimate homecoming. When you finally realize you are the eternal witness, a profound, unshakable calm takes over. You no longer have to be violently tossed around by the anxieties of the mind, the volatility of the stock market, or the exhausting expectations of society.
You recognize that all those things belong to the fleeting, transient world of appearances.
Not to the eternal truth of who you are.
That is a stunning and deeply grounding place to land today. It completely reframes how we experience our own lives. Which brings me to a final thought for you to take with you as you step back into your day.
Let's hear it.
We just spent this time exploring the reality of being the eternal witness, the unchanging vast sky behind the passing clouds of your thoughts and fears. How might holding on to that single realization completely change the way you react to the very next stressful email, the next frustrating disagreement, or the next moment of sharp anxiety you encounter today? Instead of getting swept away in the center of the storm, could you just step back, rest in awareness, and watch it pass?
It is a profound experiment, and one absolutely worth trying.
If you enjoyed this conversation and want to continue this journey of self-discovery, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter of this series. We will see you on the next deep dive.